Hey everyone, we are doing a new type of series today. Not quite sure what it'll be called yet or how frequent it will be, but I'm joined by Patrick Lathan, senior editor, and he's been helping with all the Ryzen testing and other testing. We're going to be talking about test efforts for the last week or two, issues we've run into, solutions for the issues, things like that. Before we get into that, this coverage is brought to you by the 1080SC, which has a new MSRP that is lowered with the launch of the 1080 Ti series. The 1080 and 1060 SC cards come with For Honor or Ghost Recon Wildlands, which you can choose at checkout. Learn more at the link in the description below. Okay, so let's start with closing the GTA 5 storyline.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about our issues with GTA 5 in the past. I think one of the largest issues that we had was visible stuttering with i5 CPUs, specifically the high-end modern 7600K type i5s. Right. And it was affecting test results by really skewing the 0.1% lows in our tests.
Frame times looked really bad.
Yeah, and we think that, I mean, we discussed this in a video earlier, but we decided that it was probably an engine issue. Not an issue with our testing, but something that would maybe kick GTA 5 off of our bench for i5s at least in the future. So we did a little more testing with that. There were some helpful comments about viewers that had done their own testing and had seen maybe a frame rate cap around 187.5, I think.
Yeah, with the Rage engine. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually what we saw as well. So
yeah. So basically, the story was i5 CPUs looked really bad in GTA 5 when they were fast enough. So the faster the CPU was, the worse the frame times looked, which just doesn't make any sense. The 7700K didn't have this issue. So the 7700K with hyperthreading on never had a frame time above 16 milliseconds. I was actually just talking to Wendell about this from Level 1 Techs on Twitter. So we never saw anything over 16 milliseconds. You go to the i5s or you disable hyperthreading on the i7s, and as long as they're new-ish, you run into the issue where there would be really hard stuttering to the point that it kind of would ruin the experience. But you need the faster ones because if it's not fast enough to hit the 187 or whatever frame cap, we weren't seeing the stuttering.
And this is, we saw a little bit of this issue with the newer Ryzen CPUs, not as much. Obviously, those have a much higher core count than the 4-core i5s.
But disabling SMT.
Yeah. So we've continued to have the issue, and we're going to resolve it by not including tests that have erroneous results in them.
Yeah. And so, like, that was an interesting thing. We tried back when we did the original GTA i5 testing mystery video. We talked about trying to get the FX 8370 to reproduce the results by disabling cores, but it's just not fast enough.
Yeah,
we couldn't get it to be fast enough, I think, even with the lowest settings. So pretty interesting stuff. I think basically the conclusion is, summing up the storyline, if you haven't seen the first video, the conclusion is it's an engine constraint where the game's hitting really high FPS, like 187, and throttles back performance and stuttering at that point on 4-thread or similar thread count devices. I don't recall off the top of my head if we saw the stuttering with the R5 1600X.
It wasn't nearly as bad. Okay. I think we might have seen one or two skips, but
and so that's a 6-thread CPU, not 4, which tells us that it may be related to thread count below 8, but so interesting stuff. Basically, the challenge you face, the philosophical question you face is, this game as a benchmark works well until you get to 4 threads. So as a benchmark, if we're trying to get really high frame rates so that we're CPU constrained, then it seems fine until you throw an i5 or an SMT off, R5 or R7 on there, and then it starts stuttering. But the question is, is that a real enough use case? Where in GTA 5, will you be playing to a point where you've got that high of a frame rate and you're stuttering on an i5 CPU versus the solution is to just turn up your graphics settings, which is really weird.
Or I think the solution that we see offered online a lot, if anybody has been having anything close to this issue, the solution that people immediately offer is turn VSync on, which would immediately solve
that
the
fixes
issue.
It. Yeah, fixes. The workaround, if you have this stuttering problem on a 4-thread CPU, then you can solve it by turning up your resolution or your advanced graphics, which we didn't do a whole lot with. Either one of those, as soon as you bring the FPS down below like 165 or 180 or whatever it is, then all the problems go away.
Yeah.
It's still a high frame rate. So interesting, weird thing. I did not include GTA 5 in the latest R5 benchmarks, and I've been slowly phasing it out for the i5 CPUs because it just it's showing enough issues where we just need to replace it with a different game, which we've kind of done with Total War, and that brings it to the next topic, which is seeing the Total War Warhammer uplift and Battlefield 1 uplift with Ryzen CPUs initially, which we talked about in the Ryzen revisit, and then retested it on Intel later.
Yeah, so more software issues, but kind of in the opposite direction this time. There's been a lot of reporting on Ryzen improvements in various games, but specifically there's been a lot of attention on Battlefield 1 and Total War Warhammer. And especially with Total War Warhammer, we've noticed significant improvements. And we have confirmed, I believe we've confirmed that that was due to an update to the game primarily.
The Windows update. So there were some stories online about a Windows update magically fixing all kinds of problems. With Ryzen, that wasn't really the case in our testing. What actually happened is the Windows update build 970 coincided with updates to the games that posted improvements.
Yeah.
So if you updated both those things at the same time, it looks like it's the Windows update.
Yeah.
But in reality, it was the game update. So Total War and Battlefield both had updates. Battlefield went to 1.08 with the version name or whatever. It was something like They Shall Not Pass, I think. Some Gandalf name. And Total War added some things and also somewhat silently improved performance to the point where, and this is just recapping the Ryzen Revisit stuff, but very quickly, basically, if you disabled SMT previously in the old version of the game, now the new version of the game gets your R7 or R5 performance up to the levels of where SMT off was originally.
Yeah.
So now disabling SMT still gives you performance uplift, but it's a couple percent, whereas before it was like massive. It was like 30 frames.
And really, this is exactly the kind of thing that we were hoping to see specifically from Total War. Creative Assembly said they were working on an update, working with AMD to optimize for Ryzen, and it seems like they did. We did notice improvements across the board. We retested the 2600K and a couple other Intel CPUs.
The 7600K, the 7700K, and the 7500 were all retested.
Yeah, we noticed improvements with all those. So it seems like maybe Total War is making better use of a higher thread count CPUs.
Just in general, Yeah, so for our R5 review, the 7700, 7600K SKUs and the 7500 were all retested. And then the stuff in the chart that didn't have the asterisk hadn't been retested, so that means there's actually percentage overhead there where you could improve, or headroom, I should say. So we updated for the review. If there are reviews where they have not retested Intel but have tested AMD after the patch, then there's some headroom there for Intel to improve as well. And you can actually look at our old numbers versus the new numbers for those CPUs, and you'll see the headroom. So that was interesting. Battlefield 1 had a very slight uplift, not nearly as exciting, but there was uplift. And then a couple notes, I guess, maybe we should talk about some of the mem testing stuff. So we did in the same Ryzen Revisit and in the R5 reviews. For R5, we retested everything. So the 1800X, 1700, 1700X to some extent were retested. And that included moving to 3200 megahertz memory, thanks to EFI updates that permit the memory speed increase more easily.
Yeah.
So 3200 wasn't hard, right? You didn't have to do any special.
Not hard at all. We had initially been having a lot of issues with higher frequency memory. I think everybody was having issues with higher frequency memory. But with the EFI updates and whatever other updates have happened, just EFI updates.
Selectively choosing the memory too, like using Samsung B-die only.
Yeah.
No Hynix stuff.
Yeah, so we had been using the only approved
Vengeance
memory
LPX.
kit, yeah, beforehand, and we'd only gotten up to 2933, but we got up to 3200, no problem. That is the last, that's the highest frequency you can set it to without adjusting the BCLK.
Reference clock, yeah.
On our ASUS board that we were using. So AMD sent us a memory kit that worked out of the box. I think the other 3200 megahertz kits that we had all worked straight out of the box. So we wanted to see if we could push the memory a little bit higher. We did do that in at least one of the tests that we published. We got it to
3466.
Yeah, 3466. I think that was at CL16.
I think so. Yeah. And we did 3200 at in some of our original testing. We were doing a CL14 for some stuff, and we used Guile for the 3200 kit later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, we hit 3466 with the G-Skill Trident Z kit, and I think that may have been, I'd have to check our own content. The Ryzen Revisit talks about whatever the cast latency was. And then other than that, we had pushed to 3600 finally, I think, with the Guile kit.
Maybe not with the Guile kit.
It might have been G-Skill.
We've done a lot of testing.
Yeah, there were a lot of tests in there. The 3600 results haven't been published yet because they were like quasi-stable.
Yeah.
They weren't quite stable. There was definitely a performance uplift from 3200 to 3600. Not a huge one over 3466, but we were kind of able to hit 3600. It's just the stability gets really shaky there. So there's a couple interesting things. One, it is definitely worth trying to get the higher speed memory if you can. And that's a two-factor thing there. One, price. Costs quite a bit. DDR4 prices are not great right now.
Oh.
No. Yeah. And then two, effort. So 3200, as we've said, effort really is not bad now. But if you want to go beyond that, then there can be quite a bit of effort involved in memory training, which is basically stepping through every single frequency leading up to the one you want. You can't go from 2400 to 3600 and it just works.
Yeah.
So like you went through that process the most.
Yeah. I'm not a professional overclocker. I don't do memory overclocking very much or at all before this very much. But I spent a lot of time adjusting frequency, timings, voltages, trying to stay pretty conservative with the voltages.
I think we're at like 1.45 at the most.
Yeah, with the memory, yeah. And 3466 was the highest frequency that we ended up publishing. So I wouldn't speak with confidence about any frequency higher than that with our setup.
Yeah, like it is possible, but it's just an effort thing. So we were able to do 3600. We'll have to see if we can get it more stable or if updates allow it to be more stable. We're referencing BuildZoid a whole lot throughout that whole process.
Absolutely, yeah.
So thank you, BuildZoid, for the professional overclockers insight. We worked with ASUS as well to figure out kind of what tuning we could do on the Crosshair 6. So yeah, memory testing, a huge benefit or memory overclocking for Ryzen if you can get it to work and you can afford the memory. So there is a bit of a hidden cost there. We're recommending the R5 fairly heavily in the review of it over comparable i5 chips, but it is somewhat contingent. There's a bit of a contingency on the memory speed. So just make sure 2933 and beyond, you're not in bad shape. 3200 ideally, just, there may be a bit of a sacrifice in capacity in order to get the better speeds, which if you're not using the capacity beyond 8 gigabytes, which you probably won't for gaming, it's a worthwhile sacrifice right now. And we still kind of have to test the 4-stick stuff in Ryzen. We've only done 2 sticks so far, but so that's the memory stuff. Very quickly, I guess we can mention we have plans to update the CPU benchmarking methods.
Yeah, so as mentioned, we've been having some issues with GTA. There were issues with Battlefield that I think we've discussed.
Yeah. Metro Last Light is aging. It's great to have old games. I'm always going to have an old game in our benchmarks because people ask, like, why don't you use new games? Well, we do, but we just keep 1 or 2 old ones in there. So the 1 or 2 old ones are in there because they don't get updated, which is really nice. That's a great way to keep 16 or 20 parts on the list so that we have at least some level of relative performance over the past. So we will keep something on there that's older. Total War is probably staying.
Absolutely. Yeah, Total War is
Yeah.
still updating.
Yeah.
There's like part 2 of a trilogy coming out soon. So.
Oh yeah, which makes it even more relevant. GTA 5 is probably going to get cut,
Yeah.
but we'll make some changes. I've got some ideas for synthetic testing improvements as well. There's, I don't know, I don't want to make any promises yet, but there are a couple of suites out there that look really good for testing in areas we don't currently test. And basically, CPU testing will be updated. Now, what that means, the critical part here, is whenever we update an entire test suite, like we just did for the GPU stuff, all the data goes away, like, which is very sad and unfortunate. So we lose a huge historical set of data. It means that potentially data going forward is not comparable to the old stuff. We'll do our best to retain a lot of that. Total War should be retainable. Any other games we keep should be retainable.
Yeah.
So we'll still have some historical data there. It's just in the new games, like Ash's Escalation, it's going to be a cold chart. You're going to lose a lot of data. And that's just the nature of it. So yes, CPU testing is getting an update, and we'll look more into that probably after a couple more revisit pieces. I'm not going to name the chips yet, but we have some revisits in the works. Those will likely be the last things tested with the current CPU bench, alongside maybe the R5 1400 or whatever. The R3 chips, by the time those come out, and whatever Intel's working on, we're probably going to have a new set of tests to run. So that'll give us some time to breathe from Ryzen. Last thing here, there's other testing things, but more importantly, we have this coming up. So I'll let you intro this.
I don't know how much you want me to spoil here.
The name's good.
Okay, well, this is a Cooler Boss CPU cooler. I don't really want to reveal much more than that, but
let's just show the window. I'll just show this is a window to look into it, and neither of us can read 80% of the text on the box, and the instructions manual is not in English. So I think
there's some English. There's a little bit.
There's a little bit of English. So we probably leave that there. Keep an eye out for this one. It's I think it was a $30 cooler. So, it's right up there with the Hyper 212, one of the most popular coolers of all time. The Thermaltake Contact 12, the silent one that's just come out. This is in the same price bracket, and we discovered it. So we're gonna see if we can blow the socks off of the cooler industry in the sub $35 market.
It took it like what? Like a month to deliver?
It's about 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, that should give you enough insight as to what's coming up, I guess. Thanks for watching. If you are interested in this type of thing, basically the idea is at some interval, we're going to get together and talk about all of the testing issues, challenges, and other updates that we've faced, and walk through some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, which is basically what this is. If you're interested in it, let us know. Thank you for watching. As always, subscribe for more. You can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help fund the insane amount of hours put into all this stuff, including the inevitable test bench update, which is very, very sad. Yeah, shed a tear for data. Store.gamersnexus.net for shirts, and we'll see you all next time.